Welcome back in, everybody, to the Stadium Seat Sports podcast. As always, my name is Coop, here with my partner and co-host Kriv, doing another college football preview video here for you guys. And in this one, we're talking about the biggest matchup of this upcoming week in college football, and that's going to be number 5 Georgia traveling to Austin to take on number 1 Texas. This is just going to be, I think, an incredible game. So, Kriv, I'll kick this one off, and then I'll throw it over to you to get your thoughts on this game. But this one, to me, has just absolutely massive implications in it, because Georgia took the loss earlier in the year to Alabama. So Georgia's sitting there at 5-1 now. And if Georgia loses this game, I'll ask you this question, kind of get your thoughts real quick, and then I'll jump back into my preview and kind of finish it up. But if Georgia loses this game and they're sitting there at 5-2, one of their losses to number 1 Texas and other losses to current number 7 Alabama, like, do you fear for their chance of making the 12-team playoff? Like, do you feel like they absolutely would then have to run the table the rest of the way and finish the season 10-2 to make the postseason, even with two what everyone would call really good losses? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I think the one thing that is in Georgia's favor is the fact that they do have a strong schedule. So, if they were to lose to Texas after losing to Alabama, those are about as 2 of the best quality losses, if you want to call it that you can have. Right. And then, of course, if somehow Georgia loses this game and then loses additional games, or wins out, I should say, they beat some good teams to get there.
Right.
So I think 2 losses might be their maximum. I don't think if they lose another post Texas that they would make it. I think 2 is the max. And the other thing to keep in mind that could somewhat sway that is if Alabama were to lose this week, or even lose this week, another week, whatever that looks like.
Absolutely.
Kind of just lessen their win a little bit, or their loss at Alabama. That could also factor in. So
yeah, and because I was kind of looking at this, and you brought up a great point, and I think it's slightly different, but I kind of look at this somewhat similar to like Ohio State last week against Oregon, right? Like that's about as no Ohio State fan, just like no Georgia fan, is going to sit there and be like, we are happy with a loss. But when you look at that Ohio State loss to Oregon, 32-31 on the road against a number 3 team in Eugene, that's as good of a loss as you can possibly take. But I think you hit on a really good point with Georgia in the fact that, like, and it's not to any fault of Ohio State, a lot of the teams on their schedule are not ranked and are just not great teams this year. So outside of that upcoming matchup against Penn State, if they lose that, Ohio State, I think, would be in more trouble than Georgia would, because you mentioned it, Georgia's got more significant competition on their upcoming schedule, or if they were to lose to Texas this week, they could make up for it and potentially, bolster their resume again. Whereas like the same might not necessarily be true for Ohio State if the teams on their schedule kind of continue in the same trajectory that they are. So I just wanted to ask that because, it's crazy to sit here and talk about Georgia potentially 8 weeks into the college football season being a 2-loss team, especially with all of the success that Kirby Smart and that program have had over the last, 4 or 5 years, down there in the SEC and, national championships that they've had. But, I'm really leaning towards Texas in this game. To me, and I think I mentioned it to you when we were not on air doing a recording, but like, to me, Georgia just doesn't have that difference maker, that playmaker on the offensive side of the ball like they've had in years past with like Ladd McConkey, Brock Bowers. Like they just don't have that guy to me that you can just go to and be like, you know what, this is our out pitch, so to speak. Like this is the guy that we need. If we need a big play, we're down and out, this is the guy we're going to. Like Etienne, I think, has been pretty solid at running back for them, but like they just don't have that X factor to me on the offensive side of the ball. And I think that that's really kind of not made them one-dimensional, but it's hindered them a lot. And Texas has looked very, very solid this year, whether it was Quinn Ewers in there, Arch Manning. I think we would all be in agreement, like Arch Manning is a fantastic player, but Quinn Ewers is an upgrade at the quarterback position at this point in his career. I think Arch is going to be great, but I think Quinn, having him in the game is a big bonus for Texas. I think Texas has been very good on both lines, especially the offensive line. And this is in Austin, like this is at Texas's stadium. I think there's just a lot of things that are pointing me in the direction of Texas. I think Sarkisian has been a really good hire and a great head coach for the Texas Longhorns. I obviously think Kirby Smart's fantastic. He's probably overall the best college football coach out there at the moment. But Steve Sarkisian's a great coach in his own right. And I think Carson Beck, obviously, like we talked about him as being one of the Heisman, favorites coming into the year when we did like our top 5 preview video a few months ago. I think he's got a great amount of skill, but he's also had some moments this year where he's just missing receivers. He's been turnover prone at points at points throughout the year. Like he just has not looked like the same dominant quarterback, and it very well may factor into what I said, where it's like they just don't have that out pitch. They don't have that offensive weapon where you're just like, that's the guy. Like you could say like with Ohio State with Jeremiah Smith, right? Like you could just go down the line of some of these top programs where you're like, that guy is just the X factor, the difference maker. That is like, if you need a play, it's going to that guy. And so with all like everything that I talked about, I still think Georgia's a fantastic team. I still really believe in Kirby Smart. I think it's going to be a close game, but with it being in Austin, with Ewers being back for the Texas Longhorns, I believe in Steve Sarkisian as a head coach. Their offensive line has been really, really good this year. I'm going to take the Texas Longhorns in a close game. I don't think it's any kind of significant, blowout in either direction. I think we're going to get another clash of the Titans similar to the Alabama-Georgia game, the Ohio State-Oregon game. I think it's going to be another one of those games, and college football fans are in for a real treat. But I'm going to take the Texas Longhorns in this game.
Yeah, and I think you made a lot of really good points. And for me, I think the hardest aspect to this game is to try to take away the recency bias from the game against Alabama. Because Georgia did not look like Georgia in that game. And one of the things you called out, and then we've seen it this season, is that Georgia does not have that Brock Bowers, Lad McConkey, like they don't have that guy on offense, at least not yet. No one's separated themselves as just that X factor, game breaker guy you have to game plan for. And I think that's partially why Carson Beck has struggled to this point this year, because he doesn't have that security blanket. He doesn't have that guy that can just make an easy play for him. It seems a lot of it just falls on Carson Beck being perfect.
Yep.
And I think you saw that in the game against Alabama, because he made a lot of mistakes, and then all of a sudden things started to work for him, and they came all the way back. They took the lead. He looked like what everyone had expected him to look the whole year, let alone that game. So that's a major red flag for me, and especially this is going to be very similar. They're traveling into another hostile environment, and the difference being that Texas is, this sounds absolutely crazy, Texas might be the most talented team top to bottom in college football, and they have an impressive road win, even though Michigan obviously is not the team we thought it was at the start of the year, but they have that impressive road win. They have Quinn Ewers back, and just looking at the Alabama game, I mean, Georgia gave up 374 yards passing to Jalen Milroe, and no offense to Jalen Milroe, but Quinn Ewers is a much better pure passer than that. And you could also argue that Texas at receiver is also pretty dynamic, similar to that is to Alabama with Ryan Williams and the other guys in that receiving core. So just factoring that in, a better passing quarterback and a similar receiving core talent-wise,
sure,
I think that's a huge advantage. So Georgia gave up that 374 in the air. If they give up anywhere close to that against Texas, and I think they very well might, Texas is going to win this game. And
if I can just, not to cut you off, I just want to throw something in just because it might affect your decision. It's not affecting mine. I'll just put that out there right now. But I was just scrolling our Twitter account and saw that Isaiah Bond is listed as questionable heading into this big matchup against Georgia. Apparently he's got an ankle issue. And And that's obviously Texas's star wide receiver. So just wanted to throw that out there before you give us your pick. I don't know if that's going to sway you. It's not going to sway me, but he is apparently questionable heading into the matchup on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean that would be a huge loss. Obviously, he is an X factor. He's very dynamic. But in all honesty, even then, I think Quinn Ewers. I mean, the guy is one of the best quarterbacks in college, and he just seems to be, the game just seems slow down for him, and these moments don't seem too big for him. And for Georgia, I just can't see them traveling again on the road, another hostile environment, putting it all on Carson Beck once again with a lack of weapons. And I mean, Texas loaded top to bottom. They're the type of team that you just kind of mentioned with Bond. If he can't go, they have people right behind him that can step in and maybe not perform at that same level, but there won't be a huge drop off. Yeah. And just having guys on offense that can make plays happen, make things easier for you. I mean, that's something that is invaluable. And I think that's the biggest difference between these two teams. I don't think Georgia's defense is as bad as they looked against Alabama, but they definitely showed some weaknesses. So they have some young corners out there, and they're going to have to grow up fast if they want to pull this off. But yeah, I'm with you on this one. I think Texas will bring it home.
Yeah, and I think before we kind of close this out, I think you made a great point because I made mention like they don't have a Brock Bowers, they don't have a Ladd McConkey, and you kind of reiterated that statement, but you're like, or just no one that has shown through yet, because it's not like Georgia doesn't have the talent. It's not that there's not a guy on that team that is capable of being that guy. That's certainly not what I was saying or what you were saying. You're just like, that person the cream hasn't risen to the top yet. Very capable of doing so. And who knows, maybe it happens in this game. Maybe Georgia finds their out pitch in this game. Entirely possible. They've got the talent to do so. It just has not yet happened. And because of that, going into a hostile environment in Austin, that's why I went Texas. And I think, it's very similar for you. So, we're in agreement on this one. And guys, as always, really appreciate you guys tuning into any of our videos and kind of previews here. Drop us a like, a subscription. Let us know your thoughts on this game. It's going to be probably the biggest game of this weekend, probably the best game of this weekend, hopefully, fingers crossed, and maybe one of the best games of the year. So I think we're in for another fantastic weekend as college football fans here, and we'll see you guys on the next video.